Thank you all for being here this evening. I appreciate it. I'm going to start out by telling you a story. Now, the story that I am about to tell you, every word of it is true. Okay? I'm not lying. I really did. It is true. So years ago, I used to be involved in studying primitive skills, nature observation, things like that. And I used to do a lot of primitive camping. And so the place where I grew up, we have a pretty good sizable chunk of land that connects onto a state park. And so one of the things that I would do is I'd go out with very little stuff. So I would take a little bag, it's called a little haversack bag. I would take that and have my stuff in it that I would, just like maybe a tarp, maybe a knife, and not really have a whole lot, but go up and enjoy the nature that was behind the house. So one night I was up there, I decided to go up and I made my debris hut and I piled all the stuff on. I built a fire. So like caveman TV, you sit there and you watch the fire. And then it started to get dark after a while. And so when it got dark, there's nothing to do in the woods. So I went to bed. So I crawled into my little debris hut. And I don't know how much time passed in there. And then that's when it happened. I had to pee. So I crawled back out. I didn't really want to, you know how it is when you've got to use the bathroom at night and you're in bed and you're thinking, I don't know if I want to or not. But you just, yes, I've got to, because if I don't, I won't be able to sleep. So I crawled back out. And this is when I noticed it. At the edge of where my camp area was, I saw this thing. I had never seen anything like it before in my life. It was standing there, and when I first saw it, it looked pretty tall. It looked like a fairly sizable thing. That's the best I can describe it. It was standing there like this. So I looked at it. It's like, what is that thing? And so it was glowing a Scooby-Doo fluorescent glow. That's the color that isn't exactly how it looked, but that is the color. And it was like this. So I reached back, I got my stick. Because the stick that's the first thing I had to grab a hold of. So I grabbed a hold of my stick and I started to very slowly ninja my way up to it. And the closer I got to it, the more I realized it wasn't necessarily as big as I thought it was. It was a little bit smaller. It was about like in this area. And I kept watching it. It didn't move. And I kept approaching, getting closer and closer with my little stick. And there it stood. So I finally got up to it, probably as far from me to the steps, to the handrail. And it still didn't move. And that's when I realized it was probably only about this. It was about this big. But it was like this. And it didn't move, and it was glowing. And I still had no idea what this little creature was. So I watched it, and I took my stick. I didn't stab it. I very gently poked it. And the instant that the tip of my stick touched it, I recognized what it was. It was an upturned root ball of a stump. And what I was seeing was foxfire. I had never in my life seen foxfire before. I've never seen it since. Foxfire is a bioluminescent fungus that gets into rotting wood and such, and it glowed this unearthly sort of glow and freaked me out. But I was like, once I saw it, I looked down and I could see this web of life that was going on underneath of me. And I realized there was fox. That's when it was like, this is everywhere. So again, that was the first time I saw it. That was the last time I saw it. But that is a true story of something weird that I experienced that ties in a bit later. So I'm going to date myself here when I tell you this. One of my favorite TV shows back in the day used to be CSI. Not the new stuff, not the CSI Miami, not the CSI. Grissom was my favorite. Now, after Grissom, nothing against Lawrence Fishburne or Ted Danson or any of those. They weren't Grissom. Grissom was that was the one out. And so when I start thinking about any type of investigative thing, whatever it might be, whether it's a claim of paranormal activity or whether it's a cryptid or whatever it might be, I think to myself, what would Grissom do? Well, so Grissom, when he hears of something that's happened, he ends up getting his list of suspects and putting them up on the board, right? They put them, because they have the little picture up and they give all this information about them. So when you think about cryptids, and for the sake of our discussion this evening, there's a lot of cryptids in West Virginia. There's an unmerciful number of cryptids in West Virginia. But Bigfoot is the one that has the most. Yeah, there's the Mothman, there's the Flatwoods Monster, there's the Grafton Monster, there's the Oogwa, there's the Snallygaster, there's the Sheep Squatch, the list goes on and on. So whenever there's a claim like that, you start to look at the suspects. And so what would Grissom do? He would, as for the probable or possible explanations, he'd start lining up the suspects. So the first suspect that I want to talk about is misidentification. Now, you can't see it? It's the sun. It is. It will. I hope not. Yeah. But anyway, so misidentification, suspect number one. So can we agree, is it possible that someone could misidentify something that they have seen and come to the conclusion that it's something else? And I just gave you an example of what happened to me. And when that happened, this story could have gone very differently than it is right now. If I had come out of my little debris hut and looked at that thing, saw it was there, and was like, holy crap, get me out of here, hightailed it over the hill, not caring that I left my little haversack or my stick, go over the story that I'm telling you now could be from an entirely different perspective because I misidentified that thing that was there. So, it's a reasonable assumption to say that misidentification could be one of the suspects. Yes? Is that something? Yeah. So, the next suspect, the most villainous of all, falsification. This is the one where people make up stuff. This is the one where they will create a hoax, or they will purposefully falsify evidence and then try to pass it off as real. Now, falsification isn't always done in malice. So, for example, I know this fella, and he's probably 6'5", I'd say. He's got these long, lanky arms, and he has said to me, I have often thought about dressing up in one of those ghillie suits, one of the camouflage suits that they wear, and just, hiding over the bank, and when a car starts to go by, kind of come out and traipse across the road. And he would do it just for the fun and the prank of doing it, without trying to create this huge legend or whatnot. But it's possible. And there's also people out there that do it for whatever reason, a gain of some sort. So can we agree falsification is one of the suspects? Because that's what Grissom does, right? He gets all these people together. Can we agree? Yeah, these are our best candidates. Excuse me. The third is hallucination. Now, admittedly, this could be a very small portion, but I want to tell you a story because that's what I do. I tell stories. My father, he's passed away a number of years ago, but he had a brain tumor, and they treated the brain tumor. But the interesting thing was, this was when I was in college, he had, something happened on Saturday night, allegedly. He comes, I go out, and he's like, hey, did you see that wreck that happened out in front of the house across the creek, over in front of the house last night? And I said, no. And he said, yeah. He said the police were there, the wrecker was there were all these lights, there was all this stuff. And I said, no, I didn't. And my bedroom faced that direction. So I probably would have seen it, but I didn't. So I thought, well, no, I didn't see that. I must have slept through it. So I go over to get the mail later that day, and I start to look around to see if I can find any inkling of where it happened. I could find nothing. There was nothing there. And so I go back and I get my dad and I say, I don't see anything. Where did it happen? So he comes back over with me and he is visibly confused. The look on his face is, well, I know it happened right here. I saw it. So he was telling me this story, and my father was he was a very upright sort of individual. He was a very sober and somber individual. He didn't like to joke around much. He would have had no reason to make up the story. But he also, that was one of the first indications, he also started to see people over in the woods. He had cattle, and he got to the point where he couldn't take care of them, so we ended up selling the cattle, yet he still saw them in the field. So is it possible that there's a percentage of people out there who see something and claim that I saw this big hairy creature over there in the woods, or I saw this thing? I could tell you another story. I had a client that, because I used to be a therapist full time, and she came in and she told me this story about seeing these people in her apartment. And they were shadowy. They'd be like, if she were in the living room, they'd be in the kitchen. And they'd be looking around and peeking out at her and stuff like that. And so if she had told a ghost hunter those sorts of stories, the first thing that they might have thought about is, oh, it's a shadow person. But when she was telling me, the first thing I thought to do was to have a neurological evaluation. And so we did. We sent her away. Not sent her away, but we sent her to a neurologist. And she ended up having lesions on her brain. And so she was hallucinating these shadow creatures, these shadow people in her house. So is it possible that it's hallucination? If you would never know my father was making up a story. He wasn't. To him, it was real. So I don't know the number of people out there that might say or report Bigfoot that actually have some sort of hallucination as to that. But is it possible? Can we agree that that might be a possibility? Okay. And finally, it's real. Now that's something I bet you probably wouldn't have guessed that a skeptic would say. But when we say it's real, that's the only other conclusion that we could possibly come to. Now, possible doesn't necessarily mean, or doesn't mean likely. It just means that it's not impossible. So if you're saying, if there's a claim, these are the suspects. All right. The way that you tell the difference between them is the evidence. So what does the evidence say? So when you look at the evidence, what kind of evidence is there that's out there? Now, again, we could talk about the Loch Ness Monster. We could talk about anything, but I'm going to use specifically Bigfoot because there's all these different types of evidence. When you talk about the Loch Ness Monster, you may not end up having a cast of some place where the Loch Ness Monster crawled up on the bank. But for the sake of discussion, we'll talk about Bigfoot. The evidence, you have eyewitness testimony, tracks and casts, photographs, videos, and hair samples or DNA. Now, we're going to switch from the Grissom approach. When you have evidence, you present that evidence, right? And then the attorneys take over. So in order for the evidence to be presented in court, the attorneys it has to be admissible. It has to go through a process. And then you have, I do not watch this show. So this is my wife's, she likes that one. These are my two guys. That's my wife. So you go through this process of either discounting the evidence, or when it's presented, the purpose of the attorney, after they've presented the evidence, the other attorney, is to call that evidence into question, right? I mean, we've all watched enough Law and Order. I'm not an attorney, don't play one on TV, but that's what they do. So you get into this mindset of, okay, let's look at the evidence. Eyewitness testimony. Eyewitness testimony is the weakest form of evidence because there's any number of reasons. Your memory is faulty. The question I ask, though, is can you trust your eyes? So, if you look at this, can you see the dots? How many dots do you see? Do they move? Are they moving on you? I can't see from up here because I'm very close. But this is an illusion. If you look it up online, you will see that when you're starting to focus on this one, the others sort of disappear. Are you guys seeing that back there? Because up here, I can see them all up here until I get to right here, and then they start to disappear. And this is called lateral inhibition. What happens is the way that your brain perceives information is that it sort of focuses in on certain details and then excludes other details. And so you don't necessarily see what you really think you see. Here's another example. You remember the dress that broke the internet. There were so many different perceptions of this. What color is it? Oh, I don't know. Is it black? Is it blue? Is it white? Is it gold? This dress is actually black and blue. We've seen pictures of it that are not this. And there's a number of explanations as to what the reason is that people see those different colors. But can you trust your eyes? I myself am colorblind. All right? So I'm red-green colorblind. So when my wife and I, when we're driving along on a fall day, looking up, she goes, "Oh, look at all those beautiful red leaves." I'm going, "I don't see any red leaves." So she's like, "Oh, I feel so sorry for you because you don't see that." And I'm like, I never have been able to see them, so I don't know what I'm missing. But she is an artist and she sees all these different colors. And so can you trust your eyes? Do you see what you think you saw? And there's so many people that are out there that says, "Well, I know what I saw with Bigfoot. I've grown up in the middle of West Virginia all my life. I know a bear when I see one." Do you? Do you though? Because if you have an expectation, you're sort of primed to, and a belief, you're inclined to look at things through your biases. And so as a result of that, what you see is filtered through an imperfect system. And that imperfect system is interpreted by an imperfect brain. And as a result of that, if you say you know what you saw, my question is, but do you though? Really? Because there are definite examples of why you don't necessarily see what you think you see. The next example, tracks and casts. I'm about to tell you another true story. This track, or this cast, this cast was formed in the middle of West Virginia. It was along a creek bank. It was headed in a northerly direction. As I said, there were a number of tracks, and this was the best one and the most clear, and so it was cast. And if you look at it, if you want to look at it in a little while, you can see that there's a bit of dermal ridging that's in there in different places. And I'll tell you something about this cast. I made this. I carved this out of wood. I then took and did a stamp along the creek bank in a sandy area. So every word I'm telling you is true. But I just left out some of the details. And then for the dermal ridging places, you can particularly see them up here, I took my thumb and stuck it into the toes. And then I took my hand like this and laid it in different places. And so I've created a cast that looks, you all tell me what you think. Does this look convincing? Not convincing I'm not asking if it is conclusive evidence. I'm just asking, in comparison to the others that are out there, does this look similar? Which brings me to this. If you go to bigfootcasts.com, you can find a variety of casts, of tracks from different Bigfoot that were taken at different places and different times. And if you look at mine, is there any significant, I mean, aside from all the different shapes, that's the one thing that stands out to me, are the different shapes. You have, for example, this particular, and you have this one over here, which is supposed to be a Yeti. The size, the way the toes are displayed, and so on and so forth. So my question is, if I can do this, is it not likely, or is it not possible, I should say, that some other people decided to fake some of these other casts? So I'm going to show you a clip. This is a screen grab from a Survivor Man video. And Survivor Man, Les Stroud, he is holding up this cast of a track that he found, and he's, that's the little outline. I did that. He didn't do that. So just to illustrate, when it comes to misinterpretation of tracks, there are certain animals that have what's referred to as direct registry. So like a cat or a fox, they will put their front foot as they walk along, they'll put their feet in the same tracks. Bear, on the other hand, have what's referred to as indirect registry. And so they'll put the foot down, and then the other foot will go on top of that track, and it extends it elongates it. And that's what Les Stroud has here. In this video, he specifically says, this could look like a Bigfoot track. But what it is actually, that's a grizzly bear track. So people can mistake what they see when they go through the woods and they're looking, oh my gosh, there's this big track. Okay. Could they fabricate it? Yes. Could they also find something that looks like a track? And, well, it is a track, but it's not necessarily the thing that they think it is. And the answer is yes. Now, I want to, this is another screen grab. This is from a Bigfoot museum, and they have all manner of these that were taken allegedly from the wilds of West Virginia. Some of them are donated. They were donated by Jeff Meldrum, but there's certain ones that have been taken by Bigfoot hunters in the state. The one that I particularly want to point out to you is that one. Look at the toes on that sucker. Now, to me, my toes don't look like that. And the only thing I've seen is, like in Dr. Seuss, you might see something with big toes like that. One of the questions that I asked one of the people that was selling tracks, like their cast of tracks, was, why are they so different? Is there such a variety in the way, in the structure of the tracks? And his answer to me was, well, that's just one of the mysteries that's out there. That's a mystery about them. We'll just have to solve. Can I help you? Moving on to the next person. So I ask you, are tracks in and of themselves convincing, casts of tracks? And for me, the answer is no. Photographs. Now, this is a privately owned company or page in West Virginia. They promote travel and tourism, but they also serve as a news feed. And you'll see that the couple claimed to photograph Bigfoot near New River Gorge Bridge and Bigfoot in West Virginia. So I want to show you the picture, and I apologize in advance. It's grainy, but it's the only picture that's out there. It's the one that I took off of the website of the news. This is the fella that claims that, when I show you the picture, that he saw this thing. He said he cast this track. Again, I'd like to point out the way the track looks and compare that to the others. Again, this variety of physiology in terms of what they say that the tracks look like. I've never met this man. I'm not casting aspersions. I'm just going to present to you his photograph. There it is, the Bigfoot photograph. Well, that's a good question, isn't it? So they decided, and on the news, because the clip of him was actually aired on a local news station. They cropped it, and they put the obligatory red circle to tell you where to look. And I'm assuming it's this. Now, yeah, so I'm not sure about that, but nevertheless, that's what he said that he saw. And he said he turned and he walked away from him and he went and cast a track and so on and so forth. But when you have sort of an ambiguous sort of collection of ambiguous stimuli, it's like when you're looking at bunny rabbits or looking at the clouds and seeing bunny rabbits, right? So it's pareidolia. And your brain is wired to sort of, well, not to sort of, but it actually does. It looks for patterns in ambiguous stimuli. That's why they're called projective tests in psychology. They show you some ambiguous stimuli, you look at it, and they say, oh, that's two butterflies having sex. So, something of that nature. But lest you think that it is just in West Virginia that we have circles in the wild, there is another picture. This one I didn't source. I randomly grabbed it off the internet. And again, you have this ambiguous area that is circled. And what the circle does is it focuses your attention, telling you where to look so that your natural pareidolia, the way your brain looks for patterns, can take over. Because they're trying to tell you this is what they see. Bam. And they're like, yeah, see, here's its head. See, there's its head. And then you're like, oh, yeah, okay, I can kind of see that. And it goes from there. Now, this is what Mick West refers to as information, or the low information zone. And he talks about it with respect to UFOs. There's really nothing meaningful in this. It's just noise. And in that noise, your brain is picking out a pattern. And so you would think that with cameras as clear as they take pictures of this, that, and the other in modern times, that we have something that's a little bit more specific. But no, that's what we have, and we have a bunch of them. Now, videos. I submit to you the most popular video ever made of Bigfoot, Patty, as she is known. Now, this is, again, a screen grab from the actual film. This was on, I think, the National Geographic channel at one point. And so this is the image that has been in the film. You all are familiar with the film? Been going like this across and doing, okay. So, having said that, that is what we see. Again, to me, is this clear and convincing? And the answer for me is no, because this particular film it's again in that low information zone. But over the years, people have cleaned them up, enhanced them, colorized it a little bit, and this is again the Patterson-Gimlin footage from Bluff Creek, California, filmed on the 20th of October, 1967. Now, when I look at that, I see somebody in a suit. That's just what it looks like to me. Could it be someone? I'm like the guy off of Oak Island. Could it be that this is actually? So, yeah. I suppose it's possible, but is it likely a Bigfoot? I will tell you this. There's something interesting that some people don't know, is that Roger Patterson also wrote a book. And in that book, he describes the incident. He basically describes the incident that they filmed at Bluff Creek. But you'll see that the book was written in 1966, and the film was made in 1967. This is, now you say, okay, but Daniel, that's, what's the big deal? Well, this is a picture from page 100 of that book, and it's describing the William Rowe encounter of 1957. Now, for me, again, a year ahead of when the film was made, he wrote about this. I covered it up right here with the page one. His initials are right here. He drew this. This was in his book a year before the video. A female Bigfoot walking across a field. I mean, to me, the similarities between those two are quite striking. But this being the year after that. So I ask you, is that compelling? Is that compelling when you see this particular video is one that's touted as the apex of video evidence for Bigfoot, even to this day. Here's a passage from this book on page 99. Remember, this was written a year before. For a moment, it watched me over its shoulder as it went, not exactly afraid, but as though it wanted no contact with anything strange. It's almost as if it were scripted for the video the next year. But does this, when you're looking at the evidence, for video evidence, does this suggest that there's maybe more to the story? Does it cast some doubt? Does it start to call the evidence into question? For me, it does. Then we look at hair samples. I have a story for you. Here I have, I'm not even going to lie this time. These are my hairs. My wife cut my hair. I grabbed some of them, stuck them in a jar. But you go to places where I've been to paranormal conferences where they will have hair like this, or they'll be showing you these are the things, this is the stuff, we collected this in the woods, we've got it. But scientists don't want to study it. They don't want to know, they're afraid that it's going to shift their paradigm and it's going to change the whole way, the whole system's going to collapse because. So the claim is that science wants nothing to do with it. But the problem is, that's not exactly true. Here's a study out of Oxford University where they studied 30 different samples that were collected and did a genetic analysis of the hair samples attributed to the Yeti, Bigfoot, and other anomalous primates. You will note that in this study, they found 2 of them were from two of them were from a Himalayan Paleolithic polar bear, and the other 28 were from existing extant mammals. So the hair samples that they have given weren't what they were thinking they were. Now, did they collect them in good faith? Thinking, yes, I saw something, here's the sample. Were they trying to falsify information? I can't imagine that they would try to falsify sending it to a lab, but nevertheless, you never can tell. One of the statements that's in this particular article, I think, is very telling. While it's important to bear in mind that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, and this survey cannot refute the existence of anomalous primates, neither has it found any evidence to support it. And it goes on to say that rather than persisting in the view that they have been rejected by science, advocates in the cryptozoology community have more work to do in order to produce convincing evidence. And that's what it all boils down to, is convincing evidence. Because in science, as in court, the evidence must withstand scrutiny. And so when you are presented with a track or a cast of a track, when you're presented with hair samples, when you're presented with eyewitness testimony, the job of the attorney is to literally start to poke holes in that story if we're looking at it from a legalistic perspective. Scientists, what they will do is, if they offer a hypothesis, they try to prove the hypothesis wrong. If they come up with a theory, they try to prove it wrong before it's released so that they can say, this is the closest estimate that we have of the truth. So when you look at this evidence, and is it evidence? And the answer is yes, it is. I actually had a rather lengthy discussion with an attorney friend of mine, and she knows how weird I actually am. So She's known me for years, and so she had no qualms about speaking about these hypotheticals. She said, yes, it is evidence, but you have to remember, in court, there's a foundation for the evidence. In order for it to be admitted, it has to meet certain criteria. And then, after it's presented, it's the job of this attorney to try to call that into question, to put seeds of doubt into the minds of the juror or the judge. So the evidence must withstand scrutiny in court and in science. So you have to ask yourself, how good is the evidence? Well, I mean, if people present tracts, and I can go make a tract that looks very similar, or people present hair samples, well, I can collect hair samples. If people tell you stories, I've got stories, plenty of them. The question becomes, is it verifiable? In court, there's a process, it's a chain of evidence. It's not just anybody can go out and say, here, I have evidence of this. They have to go collect it. And that person that's collecting it is certified in the collection methods. And the evidence is kept in a certain way. And you have to sign things in and sign things out. There's the chain of evidence that leads to that moment when it's presented in court. If you just take some random picture off of the internet or some random TikTok video or some random YouTube video and say, this is evidence, see? And I have had people do that, where they've said, see, look at this. And I'm like, okay, it is evidence, but is it good evidence? Is it verifiable? How do we know from whence it came? Can it be replicated? If I go down into the basement of the library right now, and I say to you, if I just were to say to you, there's a copy of The Exorcist downstairs in the library. I saw it. And you're like, okay. You could believe me or not, but guess what? You could go down and you could replicate it. You could go do exactly what I did. You could verify it. You could see it. But if I told you that there was a dragon down in the basement, yeah, it's a little bit different story, right? That's not necessarily so. You go down there, you can't verify it. You can't replicate the experience. The other question is, are there other explanations? Well, I've given you for the cast, an explanation for that. Misidentification, falsification, hallucination. So I would think that yes, there are other explanations. And is it sufficient? Is the evidence actually sufficient to prove, beyond a shadow of a doubt, or whatever level of evidence that you're wanting to go to actually make your case? So when we look at the evidence as presented thus far, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we look at eyewitness testimony. We know that there are flaws there. You don't necessarily see what you think you see. Tracks and casts, they can either be misinterpreted, as we learned with the bear, with Les Stroud, or they can be faked, as per Daniel Reed. Photographs, well, they can be faked too. I mean, in photographs and videos, they can easily be faked. The Patterson-Gimlin, there's a huge debate over whether or not Bob Hieronymus was the person in the suit that was actually walking across. Did Patterson actually know that he was being pranked? There's all of these different parts of that sort of make the story more complex and sort of call into question that was a real film, particularly the fact that he actually has a book that was published a year before. Hair samples and DNA. Well, we've looked at those. And while I know people, I know people that have these, that I know one fellow that keeps one and swears up and down that it's Bigfoot, and he legitimately believes it. He won't get it tested, and I think he's probably had it so long that any genetic material that was on it's deteriorated. But so are there other explanations? So when you look at the gestalt of the evidence, is it conclusive? And so there's different levels, as I mentioned, of evidence. There's clear and convincing evidence. There's preponderance of the evidence. There's proof beyond a reasonable doubt, or evidence that proves the case beyond a reasonable doubt. For me, instead of being clear and convincing, it's clouded and confusing. And as a skeptic, I want to make sure my level of proof is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Because I want to believe as many true things as possible and to not believe in as many false things as possible. So for me, this answer is no. So with that, keep in mind that the best way to determine if something is true is to try and prove that it's not. So before you accept evidence as true, ask some questions. Is it possible, when you're presented with some evidence, you see a video, someone tells you a story, you see a track, or whatever it might be, is it possible that the person that is telling you this may have misidentified something or is mistaken? It's a reasonable question to ask. Sometimes people get angry when you ask these questions, but nevertheless, if the answer to that is yes, which it is, I believe, how could someone have misidentified something or have been mistaken? So once you have concluded in your mind, okay, you told me you saw the Loch Ness Monster. Could you have been mistaken? Well, yes. How could you have been mistaken or misidentified something? The next question that could pop into your mind is it possible the person was hallucinating? And for that, I'd direct you back to, if anyone's ever telling you something, remember Daniel Reed's dad and what he experienced. Could the evidence have been fabricated? Well, I think here we've shown that it can be. This is one that I really always think about. What benefit would someone have from faking this? And so usually it's money or attention. And I've met people who they definitely, you can tell they're in it for the attention or the money. They'll tell you how many TV shows they've been on and how many books that they have sold and so on and so forth. And then finally, if you were going to fake this, how would you do it? So when you see something, say, okay, if I were going to fake a footprint track, how would I go about doing it? If I were going to fake a video, how? Now, just because you can't figure out the way to fabricate the evidence doesn't necessarily mean that someone else couldn't. So today, like for example, we filmed a video, and I wouldn't have known how to go about doing the green screen things and all of that the way that Kenny did. So there's other people out there that you can go Google, you can search when you're presented with any kind of evidence and ask, this is going to be faked, how would they do it? Keep in mind, skeptics ask questions. And always remember, skeptics aren't the enemy. We're here to get to the truth, whatever that might be. Some people want to dismiss cryptids. They'll say, that stuff doesn't exist. Why do you even look into it? Why do you worry? Because there's a segment of the population that does believe in it. And I also don't want to be that person that says it doesn't exist, to make a firm, definite, take a stance on it and be wrong. My philosophy is to look at it and say, okay, based upon the evidence that's presented, it doesn't warrant my belief, but is it possible? Possible doesn't mean probable. It just doesn't mean that it's impossible. So with that, I thank you so very much. Here's the links to my author page of the Skeptical Inquirer. There's my website. Here's the link for the West Virginia Skeptics Society on our Facebook page. Please go. You do not have to be from West Virginia to join this. So I try to post something every couple of days that's related to skepticism, scientific skepticism, things like that. So please come check that out. Join the group. We don't have a moratorium on where you live to be a member. So thank you very much.